Members of the Council, officers of the Council, ladies and gentlemen, please rise to welcome the Worshipful Mayor of Nuneaton and Bedworth, Councillor Jeff Clark.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Please be seated. Can I first of all ask that the live stream is started? It's live, thank you. Item number 1. As I say, welcome everyone. It's good to see everyone here this evening. I know it's very warm. Hopefully we'll be able to get through the business as quickly and painlessly as possible. For a start, there is no expected fire drill this evening, but if the alarm does sound, then please leave via the nearest fire exit, usually marked with the green banners over the things. We meet over outside, go straight downstairs outside through the front doors. We meet outside the Virgin Money Bank across the street. That's the point, gathering point. If you do need any assistance, please make yourself known to the officers. Item 2, apologies. I've not received any apologies this evening. If there's any from the floor. Councillor Watkins.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got apologies for Councillor Tracy Shepherd and Councillor Neil Phillips, and Councillor Emma Shoyer should be running late, but she should be here.
Thank you, those are noted. Minutes. The minutes are as printed. I would move that these are a true record, an accurate record. Can I have a seconder, please? Sorry, just before I take you second, I think I need to take the seconder first.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Raise any queries. Councillor Guttridge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On page 9 of our agenda tonight, the Appeals Committee have 10, which, yes, fully support that, but it said in the last line, bottom line, Green Party member to be confirmed. Have we had anybody confirmed from the Green Party yet? Thank you.
I think clarification of the Chief Executive, please, Grant.
Not as yet, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So we take a vote on the minutes as they are written. All in favour? Any against? I think they're unanimous. Thank you. Moving on. Declarations of interest. Can I receive any declarations of interest that are not already otherwise declared on page 26 of the agenda? Councillor Golby first.
Just to clarify that my job role has changed. I have submitted the change to the relevant officer, but it's not in the in the agenda.
I'm sure they'll be amended for the next occasion. Councillor Carl Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the council is a member of the Local Government Association, I have to declare that I have received payments of £165 in consultancy fees. I received a ticket to the Local Government Association conference and 3 nights of accommodation from the LGA for the conference.
Sorry, anyone else? No, that's noted, thank you. Move on to item 5, announcements. I do have one announcement myself this evening, pleasurable one. The Freeman Omgarung has organised a charity event on Sunday the 24th of July in aid of my air ambulance appeal. This is going to be at Chilvers County Liberal Club in Henry Street, and it's 6:30 for 7. There is going to be a Nepalese children's cultural show, and food and raffle, and prizes are on the programme. Obviously, I'd like to see anyone and everybody there. If you'd like to come along, you're more than welcome. It's going to be hosted, as I say, by Om, and I'm sure it'll be a good, interesting evening. I know Om's events normally are, so I look forward to seeing you. Other announcements, Councillor Wilson as leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. At annual council, I said that cabinet supports would be confirmed at a later date, and I am now going to confirm to council what those cabinet supports will be. I can confirm that Councillor Kyle Evans will be remaining as the cabinet support for public services, that Councillor Richard Baxter Payne will remain as the cabinet support for planning and regulation, and that Councillor Hartshorn will be taking on the cabinet support role for health and environment. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I also have an indication from Councillor Richard Smith.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the last 5 years, it's been my privilege to serve as Chair of Trustees to a very special charity called Volunteer Friends, who are based in Bulkington and operate across the borough. Volunteer Friends is best known for its Medicar community transport service that offers transport to get clients in need to vital medical appointments. Our volunteers also operate a renal service that gets clients to and from their dialysis appointments and supported shopping trips for those who find it difficult to get out. Our friendship groups, craft groups, dementia choir offer a welcome break to many against loneliness and isolation. Our skills services in the woodcrafting group, cooking instruction, and our soon-to-be launched 3D design and print training for young people are all recognised as first class. Volunteer Friends has long had a strong relationship with the communities teams at both Warwick County Council and Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council. And it was thanks to this relationship that during the pandemic, Volunteer Friends were able to offer themselves to become part of the very well organised frontline response, supporting the community with much needed aid that saw our volunteers distributing PPE to pharmacies, food packages and prescriptions to those in need, telephone support to those isolated, and latterly offering vital transport to those needing to get to their vaccine appointments. None of this amazing work would be possible without our more than 60 volunteers. So, Mr. Mayor, it's fitting that I can announce tonight that Volunteer Friends has been recognised at the very highest level and has been granted a Queen's Award for voluntary service. This is the highest and most prestigious national award a charity can achieve and is the equivalent to an MBE for the organisation and its volunteers. If I can ask, Mr. Mayor, that this chamber records its congratulations and support for this amazing achievement for one of our local charities, and indeed for the many hundreds of volunteers offering vital support to those in need in different ways right across our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I wholeheartedly support that and welcome that announcement. And the Volunteer Friends do an absolutely excellent job across the whole of Nuneaton and Bedworth and Bulkington. And it's good that we do that and recognise that. I'm sure members here are happy to support that. Is anyone against? No? So that's duly noted, and we add our congratulations to Volunteer Friends on their award. Thank you. Moving on, item 6, public participation. We have 5 questions from members of the public, Unfortunately, we don't have them themselves here tonight. However, the Chief Executive will read out the questions and the Cabinet member will respond appropriately.
Thank you. The first question is from Mr Sam Margrave, and he submitted the following question for the Leader of the Council. After successfully changing Rowan Ringway to Jubilee Way in Nuneaton, can the Leader of the Council please update the public on progress about plans in Bedworth to change part of Rye Peace Ringway, where the saluting diocese is located, to Frank Parsons Parade, or to give Sergeant Simon Valentine a street named after him, and let us know if this will be completed in time for Armistice Day 2022. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have always been clear that if anything in the borough is to be named or renamed after a person, then the consent of the family, especially if they have unfortunately passed, is paramount before we consider proceeding. At the last meeting of the Civic Honours Subcommittee, we resolved that the families or representatives of both Frank Parsons and Sergeant Valentine should be contacted to see, firstly, whether they support the idea, and secondly, if they have any ideas about what should be renamed. Now we have the Jubilee celebrations out of the way, officers will be liaising with their families and we will proceed according to their wishes. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Brent, back to you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The second question is from Mr Brian Wormsley and is submitted for the Cabinet Member for Housing and Communities. This council have purchased property or properties at 196 to 198 Church Road, Nuneaton, for what may appear to be twice the market value. It may also currently be running at 150% of the original planned conversion costs, a current overspend of approximately £150,000 over the budget, to convert into a home of multiple occupancy. Can the council please send me a copy of the original business plan for purchase and conversion to include current anticipated overspend and include the current estimated at completion cost? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Brent. Councillor Golby, did you wish to respond?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The answer is no. I won't be sending anything out to Mr Walmsley. We've got commercial elements that we need to maintain as confidential, and that's what I'll be doing. And I'd also query that these statements that are made in here are not actually factually correct. So if you're asking for a business case, how can you possibly be putting all these numbers in here if you haven't got the business case? It's 2 properties for a start. We're looking at creating 14 individual properties out of the 2 properties that we've purchased, and it's not an HMO. So an HMO is rooms, shared facilities. It's not that. It's individual units with individual facilities to better service the needs of our homeless families, because you don't want kids being brought up in an HMO, but unfortunately we have families who have children who are homeless. So this is a better way of servicing our needs. But overall, no. The answer to the question is no. I won't be sending out a business case.
Thank you, Councillor Golby. Back to you, Brent. Question number 3, Mr Alan Baxter.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, this question is from Mr Alan Baxter and is submitted for the Cabinet Member for Health and Environment. My question relates to the main parks in Stockingford. In February 2021, Nuneaton News published a news article covering the Borough Council's announcement that Whittleford Park was going to be transformed into a destination park as part of the borough's leisure funding programme. The article stated that a public consultation was planned and that Section 106 funding was available from housing development schemes in the park's wards, Galley Common, Barpool, Kingswood and Camp Hill. To date, none of this has been delivered. Could the Council tell us when to expect the public consultation and where the Section 106 money is for Whittleford Park? With Stockingford Recreation Ground, there is a master plan in place. The recent installation of play equipment does not conform to what was published in the master plan. The equipment is not in the position indicated by the plan. Could the Council confirm whether this master plan is still in effect or whether it has been put into the rubbish bin and cancelled. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Brent. Councillor Guttridge, did you wish to respond?
Yes, please. I thank Mr. Baxter for the question. The Council are currently working on a draft concept plan with our consultants for Whittleford Park, which we hope to be able to consult with the public on later in the year. This will then inform future developments within the site as funding opportunities become available. Section 106 funding is being currently sought from local developers where applicable, although it must be noted that such sums are specifically for addressing the further demand on existing Sorry. 106, right, yeah. Must be noted that such sums are specifically for addressing the further demands placed on existing sites. As a result of that, additional development, and that triggers the receipt for such sums, is determined by the pace at which these developments are constructed. As certain other funding opportunities have become available, i.e. BPAH, LUF, Towns Fund, etc., with finite resources, we are focused on taking up and securing these immediate funding opportunities for the benefit of our borough residents and developing the necessity detail of those, whilst there has led to a pause in progressing the Whittleford Park. It has always been our intention to pick this up again once the details have been prepared. The master plan you referred to was originally drafted in 2008, 14 years ago, and was never formally adopted by the council at that time. As you are aware, we are currently developing a new green space strategy alongside a new revised play and allotment and tree strategies. As I have previously stated, we are going to underpin that in the terms of developing concept plans, initially for destination facilities, Riversley Park and the Transforming Nuneaton Revamp Project and Miners' Welfare are now published, and we are currently working with the consultants on the draft plan for Whittleford Park, and then rolling out that to community parks for such that as Buttermere Park as example.
Thank you, Councillor Guttridge. Question for Ms. Katrina Slamensinski. I hope I pronounced that right. Brent, did you want to read that out, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I think that pronunciation is correct there. And this is a question for the portfolio holder for Health and Environment. My question relates to the clay pool in Whittleford Park and the recent algae bloom there caused by the hot weather. The local fishermen on the Whittleford pool have noticed that the pool has a blue-green algae bloom developing. The bloom may be toxic to the pool wildlife and may also cause health issues in humans. My question is, what is going to be done to help prevent the algae bloom and to protect the pool's wildlife? The fish are likely to die due to low oxygen levels in the water, just like what happened at Stubbs Pool in Camp Hill in the past. Also, what is going to be done during the hot weather as more and more people are open water swimming in the borough's open water spaces, like the clay pool and Ensis pool, which has resulted in deaths in the past? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Brent. Councillor Guttridge, did you wish to reply to that question?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I thank the lady for the question. Algae blooms are a natural occurrence, featured particularly during periods of weather such as we are currently experiencing. In such cases and necessary, we will inform the Environment Agency, and in addition to our existing signage concerning water bodies, provide further temporary signage warning members how to report such of the public to keep themselves and their pets out of the water. More details of how to support findings can be found at the link below, consult-environment-agency.gov.uk. In respect of the oxygen levels in water bodies, as we have previously indicated where necessary, we will be making arrangements to reduce fish stocks where overstocking has occurred when appropriate to do so. In respect of the open water swimming, our advice remains as we outlined in our recent press release. Stay safe. Avoid open water swimming. Don't swim in open water. Nuneaton and Bedworth Council, alongside the partner Warwickshire Police, are advising people against swimming in open body waters, and we also notified the schools. Lakes, pools, rivers, canals and quarries are all an example of bodies of open water which can carry many dangers for swimmers, which can be fatal. The risk is especially high if you're swimming alone and have no one there to assist you to get into difficulties. There is also a risk to others who can lose their lives in attempting to rescue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Guttridge. Could you just confirm, Councillor Guttridge, just can you confirm that information is also on our website and the link that you talked about, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Also, we've just released a press release again in the last couple of hours about open water swimming and the hot weather.
Thank you. Come on to final question from Mr. John Ison, question 5. Brent, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, question from Mr. John Ison for the portfolio holder for health and environment. Can I ask why the council have got the Nook on a 110-year lease and they have had it for over 20 years now? Why haven't they walked the stream and checked for overhanging trees and branches? Also, the inlet into the Nook is overgrown with reeds and has caused a blockage, and with the sheer volume of water, what comes down, the water is overflowing the bank and flooding a grassed area and has found a new way in, but it is a very narrow entrance. This needs sorting urgently. My ward councillor is aware of this, and when are we meeting with the management plan for the site? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you once again, Brent. Councillor Guttridge, did you wish to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thank Mr. Eisen for his question. All the friends of the Nook. The terms of the lease in respect of the Nook is a matter of public record that reflects the arrangements negotiated between the council and the landowner at the time it was entered into. The site, which is a local wildlife site within Environment Agency floodplain zones 2 and 3 as such, would expect during times of inclement weather to see the water on the surrounding surfaces, which reflects its primary function as a nature reserve. The council have recently developed a revised management plan with our ecology colleagues at Warwickshire County Council, alongside this with the new action plan and memorandum of understanding for working with local voluntary groups. And we will be working with all members of the Friends of the Nook to deliver this plan. We have asked twice for the Friends of the Nook to come into the council house and sit down with officers to discuss the memorandum of understanding and the management plan. We have had no responses. I will instruct officers when they return from vacation to send the Friends of a Nook a third offer of a visit, which I am prepared to chair myself in the council chamber with the officers, but we will only meet in the council chamber or council meeting rooms because we have all the documents here that we might need to talk. Also, I would like to invite the ward colleagues to come and all the Friends of the Nook so we can sit round the table and let's sort this plan out once and for all and know where we're going. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Guttridge. That concludes questions from members of the public. We now move on to item 7, questions by members. The first one I have is Councillor Mandy Tromans. Can I invite you to ask your question, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is for the portfolio holder for health and environment. I'm sure we all recognise that the access to suitable outside space and play areas is essential for the well-being of young people across the borough. This is certainly a priority for the residents, brought very much into focus post-pandemic, and I understand that the portfolio holder shares this view. Can the portfolio holder please update us on actions being taken to address this and what residents might expect to see, particularly in my own ward, Galley Common, where despite significant increase in housing numbers and families moving into the area, they currently have very little?
Councillor Guttridge, a busy night. Wish to respond?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I thank the councillor for the question. We wholeheartedly agree that access to suitable public open space and play provision is essential for the health and well-being of our children of all ages and abilities, and indeed adults across the borough. With this in mind, we are in the process of putting together a new green space and play strategy for the borough. The last one ran out in 2016. This will include an audit of play spaces in terms of quality, accessibility and play value, resulting in a plan to tackle any underperforming play spaces across the borough on a priority basis. Work on the strategy should be completed in 2023. Centrally, the plan will be the utilisation of 106 sums from developments in each area when received. Galley Common has 9 equipped play areas in the ward. 7 of the 9 have been updated in the past 12 years, and only 2 of them are over 15 years old. For information, the typical lifespan of a play area is 15 plus years. I must deviate now and say Buttermere Park is over 30 years old. A number of housing developments in the Galley Common ward are providing equipment spaces within their developments for residents to use. Above that, we have negotiated on site-by-site basis additional funds to improve nearby play areas. The sums will be used within the strategy and refurbish play accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Guttridge. Move on to question 2. Councillor Brown, can I invite you to ask your question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is for the portfolio holder for public services. The new mountain bike track in the Miners' Welfare Park, Bedworth, is a huge asset to the town, the park itself and the borough. It provides much needed high quality facilities to allow kids of all ages to benefit from healthy exercise, one of the key aims of this council. Can the portfolio holder please provide an update about the success of the track, including details of numbers of people using it? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Markham, did you wish to reply?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for your question, Councillor Brown. The mountain bike trails within Bedworth Miners' Welfare Park have now been open for 5 months. The usage over these initial months has been significant, with just over 26,000 rides tracked on the trails between February and May. With the summer holidays approaching, we envisage the usage to increase and spike significantly. The breakdown of riders per month are as follows: February, 7,421, March, 6,040, April, 7,010, and May, 5,450. Everyone active are doing work within the community to support and encourage cycling uptake within the borough.
Thank you, Councillor Markham. You've got a supplementary question, Councillor Brown?
Mr. Mayor, supplementary question, please, if that's possible. Based on what we've just heard then, Councillor, will you agree with me that the success of the bike track is in marked contrast to the climbing wall that was championed by the previous administration of this council and actually represents much better value to the council taxpayer.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Markham.
Thank you. Absolutely, I agree. The mountain bike trail came in just below budget and is clearly regularly used by the public. So a good use of the funding, unlike the climbing wall, which was over budget and rarely used. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Markham. Question 3 from members. Councillor Pandahar, can I invite you to ask your question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is to portfolio holder for public services. Can the portfolio holder for the public service inform me if the council has data on the number of people who visited the recently sanctuary event, and has the council considered the great economic benefit this event brought to the town? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pandahar. Councillor Markham, did you wish to respond again?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for your question, Councillor Panda. On the recent sanctuary event held in Bedworth Miners Welfare Park, I can indeed inform the member that we had around 17,000 people visit the event over the delivery week, and 9,560 people registered tickets for the actual burn itself. We are working with the event organisers, Imagineer and Artichoke, to have an end-of-project report to update the council on a range of outcomes that were achieved. This will include the economic value brought to the town and wider impact this had for the borough. And as I'm sure members will have already seen, Bedworth was reported in local, regional and national media regarding the sanctuary event, and there was a personal visit by the Archbishop of Canterbury. I would like to thank all those involved in helping to organise this event in Bedworth, and we look forward to working with partners in the future for other opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Markham. Moving on to question 4. Councillor Hammersley, can I invite your question, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Could I ask the portfolio holder, you seem flavor at the moment, to bring us up to date with the physical activity hub, and have the plans now been passed and what the expected date of the construction is to commence, please? Thank you.
Councillor Markham, again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I thank Councillor Hammersley for raising the question concerning the activity hub, and can confirm that the plans are indeed in place. The Council's project management team provided a comprehensive update report to the Cabinet on the 22nd of June, confirming that the hub's planning application has now been approved and that REBA Stages 4A is complete, and the team are well underway with REBA Stage 4B. The overall facility mix and design plans for the facilities are approved and have been signed off by Sport England, who have been working with Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council since its submission of its strategic outcome planning guidance. This took into consideration the borough-wide public consultation, leisure facility data, and was part of our submission for financial support to Sport England, providing evidence of the need for increased leisure facility provision at the Bedworth site. Following a comprehensive procurement exercise, BAM have been appointed as a construction company, and they are now working hard with the project management team to review design and plans and consider their costs, and will be submitting this to the team over the coming months for the project management team to consider. As I'm sure we all appreciate, there are significant increases in construction cost and inflation that will have an impact on the overall cost, and something that we will have to work to our agreed budget. The successful applications for the Levelling Up Fund and Sport England's capital investment will go a long way in supporting the overall project delivery. At this time, our draft project timelines will be to be on site in the Miners Welfare Park in October or November of this year. And just so people don't get too excited, we're actually commencing some site investigations later on this month. So if you see activity, we haven't started yet. We're not starting till October, November. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Moving on to question 5. Councillor Joy Coventry Morton, can I invite you to ask your question, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is for the portfolio holder for housing and communities. I know from meetings with the local police, data and feedback from the local community that there is a definite rise in antisocial behaviour and intimidation in Bedworth Town Centre and surrounding area. I could quote examples, but I won't tonight. Antisocial behaviour and intimidation is taking place by groups of local youths, some riding bikes and some often wearing full face coverings. There have been a number of serious, ugly assaults on adults and young people in both Bedworth and Nuneaton. I have witnessed myself some of this behaviour just walking through the town and the park. My question is, are we sure Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council are contributing as much as they can to the reduction of crime and disorder in our towns by the use of CCTV and its monitoring? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Golby, did you wish to reply?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I'd just like to point out that Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council are not the police, and we've got no powers to replace the police in any way, shape or form. Any assaults or incidents like the ones that have been described should be reported to the police, not the council. We do work alongside the police, and yes, I am confident that under this leadership we are doing everything we can with the resources and tools we've got available to try and clamp down on crime and disorder in our towns. I will actually be giving a more rounded answer later on, because I've got several questions that are all along broadly the same theme, so I will fill out this kind of speech, should we say, in the process of doing that. However, I am interested in the fact that the police are talking in this manner, because I have quite open dialogue with my police officer counterparts and colleagues, and I will actually be taking these comments up with them directly, as I have done with so many other things recently. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Golby, thank you. Moving on to question 6, Councillor Graham Morton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, building on Councillor Coventry's question, I'm also keen to ensure that we maximise our opportunities to reduce antisocial behaviour. So what uses are we putting public space protection orders to in the borough, and have we had any successes? Secondly, what is the scope to use these powers to assist the police in dealing with the issues Councillor Morton described in the town centre? Could the creative use of these powers be used in other problem areas? For example, with nuisance, illegal use of motorcycles across the borough and in my ward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Morton. Councillor Golby, did you wish to respond to that question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yep, I will respond. Currently, we've got public space protection orders which are intended to deal with particular nuisances or problems in particular areas that we recognise as being detrimental to the local community and their quality of life. These impose conditions on the use of the area which apply to everybody and ensure that the law-abiding majority of our residents actually get to enjoy quality time in the public spaces without fear or favour. And one of these issues that we've got is antisocial behaviour. Yeah, don't deny it. But what I would also say is a PSPO doesn't actually abdicate anybody from their parenting responsibilities. And where do parents think their children are? Because you've already said these are youths. So where are the parents? What are the parents doing? If I'd have been brought home by the police at any point in my adolescence, I would have really known about it. I was more worried about my mum than I was about the police. And I think possibly we might need to get back to some of those values. We do have PSPOs in place that help address issues from the consumption of alcohol, psychoactive substances, and begging that leads to ASB. The begging one has been very effective in the town centres. There is no doubt about that. You can see that with your own eyes when you walk through the town centre. As far as motorbikes are concerned, what we have to do is balance the how enforceable these PSPOs are. And again, we're not the police, we are the council. So we wouldn't really, realistically, be able to enforce any sort of PSPO against illegal use of motorbikes. So what I would suggest again is, if there is anybody that is witnessing illegal use of anything, including motorbikes, ring 101, ring 999 if there's a danger to life, or log it on the Warwickshire Police website, because that is what the police are there to do. We as a council are not here to police the town. The police are here to police the town, and we are here to facilitate that as best way as we can, which I believe we are doing with the PSPOs we've got.
Thank you, Councillor Golby. Moving on, Councillor, question 7, Councillor Walsh. Invite you to ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask the leader of this council, Councillor Wilson, a straightforward question. Can you please confirm that the controversial pieces of artwork in Bedworth and Nuneaton were not commissioned by or paid for by Nuneaton Borough Council, so that to quash all the false comments on social media and the gossip mongers around the town? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Wilson, do you wish to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to thank Councillor Walsh for the opportunity to correct the record. Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council neither commissioned nor paid for the installations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Question 8, Councillor Brett Beetham. Did you ask your question? Keep moving round.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Although it is within the remit of the police, can the portfolio holder for housing and communities please inform us of what actions the council has taken in regards to the incidents of serious crime from late June and early July, as I've had many residents contact me highlighting their fear of crime. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beetham. Councillor Golby, once again.
It's like Crime Watch tonight, isn't it? The recent spate of serious and violent crime in Nuneaton is totally out of the ordinary. Again, I've said it to a lot of people that I've spoken to about this. It's not usual behaviour to have all of those serious crimes in such a short space of time. For quite a lot of places, not just Nuneaton and Bedworth, but quite a lot of places. You expect to see that in a big city, but not in a town like ours. Kids having machete fights outside of Asda at 5 p.m, should I say, on a Friday afternoon is not normal behaviour. And again, kids, what are the parents doing? Where are the parents? Honestly. So working with NABSCOP, which is Nuneaton and Bedworth Safer Communities Partnership, working with our partners through that, we are addressing the issues that we find. I'm the chair of NABSCOP, and you can be sure that nobody leaves that meeting without getting a piece of my mind on what is going on in our town and our borough and our wider Warwickshire, particularly in the north. I think they all feed into each other. So I'm very clear on my expectations of outcomes when we go into these meetings, and people should be very clear on what they are when we leave them. On a personal note, I've spent a significant amount of time in contact with my counterparts in Warwickshire Police, most notably Dave Williams. I was up at the Justice Centre for several hours last week with him, just talking through everything that's going on, what's coming out of intelligence that they have, what intelligence we can put in. I was talking to the SNT teams. Both Marcus Jones MP and I have been very, very vocal with our police contacts. And we have, again, Marcus and I have got a meeting with the Chief Constable of Warwickshire Police in, I think it's 2 weeks, isn't it? Not next week, the week after, where we are going to be, again, expressing our views. Now, the conversations we've been having from our side of things also linking in with stuff that's been going on internally within the police themselves, has led to Operation Panor, which is currently going on, which is Operation Panor is targeting those areas and communities which are being most impacted. And this also includes a significant increase in police presence within the borough as well. Nuneaton and Bedworth will be supporting the engagement activity on the ground in key target locations. I'm not going to say which locations they are because you don't want to give them the heads up. We'll be using the Nomad cameras and the mobile CCTV units, and I want to ensure communities feel safe, because that is part of the thing that we're looking at. We've got the PSPOs that I've already mentioned to address ASB, and I've also called in the Police and Crime Commissioner and the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner for a meeting with myself and the leader to try and find out better ways that they can be included in this whole process. Outside of all of that stuff going on, we are working with schools. We're ensuring strong engagement with community contacts and other third-party organisations in key areas. And through the Housing and Communities team, we've got communities engagement work being planned throughout the summer, where we'll be ensuring community safety and cost of living information is freely available for anybody to come and have a discussion about it. That will be our priority. We've got a programme of works which is being undertaken surrounding the escalation of ASB and violence in the borough. This is included in the last few months working with secondary schools, community organisations, programmes to engage and advise young people. There's continuing targeted programmes in a number of secondary schools in Nuneaton and Bedworth. In a wider context, after discussions with local residents, places of significant trouble, or to identify places of significant trouble, we did some work in May 2022, which was to upgrade the cameras in Pillbank Rec. And in April, just before that, we installed barriers in the Pillbank Rec car park so it can be locked up in the evening, because that is identified as a place of significant interest of criminal activity. It has been for quite some time, but woefully nothing was really done about it, so I'm doing something about it. Last week, every councillor will have had an email explaining the completed restructure of the housing teams with a greater focus on tenancy and neighbourhood management, which includes specifically dealing with antisocial behaviour. As part of this new approach, we've also got the community payback team doing work around the borough, which is something that I particularly wanted to do. I am very serious when I say that I want people who take out of our community to put something back in. And that is one of the ways that we're looking at doing that. And I'm also very serious when I say we're taking a zero tolerance to ASB within our housing stock, because I understand that it actually contributes to wider issues in the borough, not necessarily in our housing stock, however, it does contribute. I've said it repeatedly, and I said it in the papers the other day, there is an expectation of minimum standards of behaviour for our tenants. If it's not the case, we will take action. And on this note, one of the individuals involved with some of the recent activity, recent ASBs, was identified as a council tenant, and as a result, we've started eviction proceedings. Again, you're not owed anything by this council, and if you don't stick to the rules like everybody else, there will be consequences. I'd like to reassure residents of our borough, as I said on the BBC Midlands News last week, that we cannot do this without their involvement. We need help to crack down on these people. People out there, our residents, know who these people are, they know what they're doing, they know where they are, they need to tell us. And it can all be done in complete confidence, and I would put a call out to people that just let us know. We can deal with it confidentially, we can deal with it between our partners, and we can actually try and stop what's going on. So that's my plea to our local residents.
Thank you, thank you, Councillor Golby. Moving on, question 9, Councillor Condacor, can I invite you to ask your question, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As expected, the population projection used to justify the crazy sub-regional housing targets was out by some 38,500 people at the date of the last 2021 census. Now that we have a temporary housing minister, Mr Jones, who's one of our local MPs, is the Cabinet member willing to write to the new minister asking for the 4,000 housing overflow from Coventry to be temporarily removed from our housing target while we revise our local plan? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smith, did you wish to reply?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I thank Councillor Condacore for his question, and I was personally extremely pleased to see census figures supported the view of this administration that Coventry's population numbers were overinflated by almost 40,000, which in turn created an inflated sub-regional housing requirement. This news totally supports this administration's action to immediately withdraw from the devastating Memorandum of Understanding on taking control of this council last May. That agreement, signed by the previous Labour administration, added 4,000 Coventry overflow houses to their third-rate borough plan, which we are now reviewing at pace. The power to grant a moratorium on large-scale housing development rests with the Secretary of State for levelling up housing and communities. And this administration has written to the two previous Secretaries of State to request a moratorium on large-scale development whilst we review this borough plan, the results of which will map out our housing requirements up to 2039, and this new borough plan will not include any precious greenbelt or 4,000 overflow houses from Coventry. I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate the Right Honourable Marcus Jones MP on his recent promotion to Minister of State for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. And I look forward to meeting him in the near future to discuss local issues as part of my portfolio. However, his new position does not give him the power to grant moratoriums on development. That power rests with the Secretary of State. And in any case, the fact Mr Jones lives in the borough would negate him from making any such decision anyway. As I've previously stated, we've already written to the last two Secretaries of State with no success, regardless of the full support of all three of our MPs. Given the temporary position of the current Secretary of State, pending a new leadership in government, it's unlikely we would get any response from another letter at this time. I will, however, keep an open mind and reassess the situation as necessary, and in the meantime carry on with the borough plan review at pace, which, if we continue to stick to our ambitious timetable, is now just 6 or 7 months away from possible submission to the Inspectorate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Condacore.
Thank you. Can I have a supplementary, please? Thank you for your long answer, but I think circumstances have changed compared to when the last two letters was written. So I will ask you do consider writing a letter, because at least it puts it in the in tray of the permanent ministers when we have a new PM, whoever that may be.
Councillor Smith, did you wish to respond to that?
No, I've already given mine.
Thank you. Moving on, question 10, Councillor Shires. Welcome. Your question, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I apologise for being a little late. Okay, so my question is, all the years of Conservative government cuts to services have harmed families in youth services in Nuneaton and Bedworth, and has directly resulted in the current increase in antisocial behaviour. Combined with this, there is a lack of parks which are accessible to families with children who have additional needs, which is prevalent in the most deprived areas of our borough, where ASB is also at its highest. As such, I would like the Leader of the Council to explain just what is the Council's young person strategy, which should also include accessibility. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Shires. Councillor Wilson, did you wish to reply?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We have, unfortunately, seen a spike in antisocial behaviour in our borough over the past few weeks, and Councillor Golby has already given a full and extensive reply to the activities that we have been undertaking, and her in particular. However, Councillor Shires has made the wrong diagnosis to the problem. Let me be absolutely clear. The only people to blame for the current behaviour are those who are committing the crimes themselves. Responsibility for the criminal activity of these youngsters lies firmly and squarely at home. Parents ultimately have responsibility for their children, no one else. We need to move away from this culture that the fault lies with an institution. It is the job of parents to parent. I know it's a revolutionary concept, Mr. Mayor. The great shame of all this, however, is that the great majority of our youngsters are actually honest, law-abiding and decent people who do not deserve to be tarred with the same brush as the minority who perpetrate these crimes. Councillor Shires is also incorrect about our parks. We have almost 60 areas of play and open spaces across our borough. Labour was in charge for 45 out of 47 years. If she wants to look at where the blame lies for the accessibility of our parks and the strategies of this council, then she should look around her side of the chamber, as depleted as it is, because the failure lies with her colleagues on the Labour benches. And it is this Conservative administration that is fixing the problems that we inherited from Labour. The play and open space strategy that should set out our plan for our parks and their accessibility expired in 2016. That was 6 years ago, under the last Labour administration, of which 2 of the 3 councillors there tonight were cabinet members of. When we took control, we discovered that Labour failed to put any proper strategic thinking in place, and we have immediately begun work on fixing their failures. A new play and open space strategy has been commissioned, and work is underway, being ably led by Councillor Guttridge and his team. Finally, Mr. Mayor, I am pleased to report that as part of the refurbishment of Buttermere Park, accessibility is at the forefront of the designs, and it will incorporate fully accessible features so that all of our community can enjoy the new park. And I would actually highlight, Mr. Mayor, that the reason why Buttermere Park is being done is because St Nicholas and Weddington was foisted with almost 6,000 new houses, and so they deserve to enjoy some rewards for the pain that they have endured over all these years, thanks to the last Labour administration. And as we refurbish more parks across our borough, accessibility will be incorporated where we can. Yet again, we are faced with a record of failure under Labour. It is us, as a new Conservative administration, that is building a record of action and dealing with the real issues that face our borough today. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Did you wish to have a supplementary, Councillor Shires?
Well, actually, there's a couple of things. Really, the end of my question was, what is the council's young person strategy? So that would be great to know of what that is, not just concentrating on parks. That was kind of part of. But the end part of that was, what is the council's young person strategy, which should include accessibility and young person strategy. I'm sure you don't need any further information on that. And with regards, if we're talking about antisocial behaviour, when it comes to cuts in public services, and links have been proven by organisations such as the Joseph Rowntree Foundation and Professor Marmot, that there is a clear link between reduced access to services and antisocial behaviour, whether that's in deprived areas or other areas. And I'm more than happy to get Professor Marmot's Healthy Lives, Healthy Societies to you. But if you could answer, what is the council's young person strategy?
I was going to say, I'm happy to go back to Councillor Wilson in relation to Councillor Wilson, if you wanted to answer that question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Well, actually, her question did focus more on parks than anything else, so I addressed the parks question. In terms of the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, I think all of us know it is a rather left-leaning organisation and has its own political bent, so I won't be taking any lessons from them. But in terms of a youth strategy, Councillor Golby mentioned a number of activities that is already ongoing and underway with the young people of our borough. We have fantastic museums, fantastic play and open spaces that people can use. Indeed, if you look at the Miners' Welfare Park, it is a beacon in the whole of Warwickshire, if not the wider West Midlands, in terms of what we actually have for young people and the wider community, which we saw fantastically over the Platinum Jubilee celebrations, Mr. Mayor, which we were out night and day, it felt like, when it came to that. But ultimately, I think Councillor Shires is directing her question at the wrong area. She should be aware that the Borough Council does not have responsibility for children and youth services. It is responsibility of the County Council. So she could direct her question to them. But actually, I think we're doing an awful lot for children in our area. And also, we should not forget the tremendous work which is done by the third sector. as well, which actually supports people and young adults in our community. They are actually the people who can get more deeper rooted into the community and do more work with them than a council ever could. And that is not to say that our council is useless, far from it, but we have different strengths that mean that we can get into different areas of different communities. And the people who are actually from those communities are far better at keeping their children under control and looked after. But ultimately, Mr. Mayor, I don't resign from a single word I said. Ultimately, it is parents who should be controlling their children. No one else is responsible for them. They should be making sure that they behave. When I was 12, I knew the difference between right and wrong. I'm sure that they can too.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Moving on, question 11, Councillor Wright. Can I invite you to ask your question, please?
Yeah, question to the portfolio holder for Finance and Corporate. The deadline for signing off the audited 2020-21 council accounts was extended to September 2021 last year. Whilst it is true that few councils actually met this deadline, it's nevertheless concerning that nearly a year later, Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council still seems not to have done so. Can we have a latest estimate as to when these accounts will be signed off and how late the 2021-22 accounts are likely to be? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Croft. That first time this evening. Back to you. Do you wish to answer that question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'd like to thank Councillor Wright for his question, and I shall welcome him to his place. He's quite right to point out that the FY 2021 accounts have been delayed, and because it is his first question, and for the benefit of members, I shall give him some context as to why we are where we are. This has been the toughest period for local government in living memory, with unprecedented challenges of the pandemic affecting service delivery across all areas of the country. As he quite rightly concedes in his question, we are not alone in delays to audits and to accounts. That's the broad picture. Specifically at MBBC, we have faced our own pressures related to staffing and systems. Having replaced our Director of Finance and Section 151 officer over the last 12 months and lost key members of the finance team this year. This has not only caused staff shortages, Mr. Mayor, in that area, in an area that was already overstretched, but the loss of institutional memory after a very long time in post has been hugely disruptive. Now, we know this council has had recruitment and retention problems for some time. In my first meeting as portfolio holder, I was informed that we had just filled a vacancy we had had open for 5 years. Now, this fact, combined with the current tightness in the labour market, especially in qualified posts in local government, has meant that recruiting to the vacancies has been a protracted and a difficult process. That's the staffing side. And I do just want to say parenthetically, given where the question has come from, that Councillor Wright may wish to talk to his party colleague about creating a welcoming environment for staff and staff overstretch, given that the councillor concerned has been publicly censured in this chamber for workplace-related complaints. And just a few weeks ago, Mr. Mayor, he decided to call in every item on the planning weekly list in a deliberate attempt to waste officer time and gum up the whole process. So we can hardly have complaints from that quarter about delays in processes. Now, more disturbingly, Mr. Mayor, as we have reviewed our finance systems and processes this year, we have discovered significant flaws in systems and archiving policies going back many years, which has contributed to the delays. Every year, the auditor's report warned that too much weight was being placed on singular officers who held key knowledge which was not sufficiently shared. Previous management administrations did not heed these warnings. Our current situation proves they should have, and this is the record of failure which Councillor Wilson spoke of a moment ago under the previous administration. All of this goes to show the urgent need for the transformation programme that we are going to introduce in this council. If we don't change, we're done for. We know we need to change our policies and processes to be more efficient and more competitive as an employer. We know that we can never again have single points of failure in our teams across this council. Our motto must be, as I have said, reform with no sacred areas. We will bring forward analysis and reform proposals relating to these problems of efficiency, cost, recruitment and productivity as soon as possible. In the immediate term, we have also agreed the recruitment of interim resource for the finance department. We have our new finance director. We've just hired an interim head of finance to start very shortly, and we've approved the cost for the recruitment of interim business partners, which will ease the pressure. So to return to the question directly, I can assure Councillor Wright that a roadmap is now in place for the FY 2021 audit to be concluded, and the final accounts to be presented to the Audit and Standards Committee in September of this year, with the final FY 21-22 accounts to be sent to committee and approved by the end of this year. So finally, I do want to pay tribute to the finance team for working exceptionally hard under exceptionally tough circumstances, particularly our new Section 151 officer, who has risen to the challenge magnificently in these past 2 months. It's been something of a slog, but she is well qualified for the task, and we will continue to rely on her and the team as we govern this borough in very difficult times. So that answers the councillor's questions. He's got to cut his teeth somewhere, and the annual accounts might as well be where he starts, but we will take no lectures from that particular party in terms of good governance and the way to treat staff. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. Moving on to the final question then, Councillor Evans, question 12.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could I ask the Cabinet Member for Health and Environment if he can first outline the Council's responsibilities with respect to the maintenance of reeds within local wildlife sites? Second, has the Parks Department conducted reed removal works within the last 12 months? And finally, does the Parks Department have any plans to carry out reed removal works within the next year?
I'm just very mindful of the fact that we are near to 45 minutes and there might be a requirement, maybe, to get it if there's any supplemental question. Did anybody want to move that before we get the response? You wish to move that? Is that seconded? Councillor Golby. Councillor Guttridge, did you wish to respond to? Yeah, we need to take a vote on the suspension of standing orders first. Members happy to suspend standing orders so that we can complete the questions? Any against? 3. Any abstentions? 2. It's carried. Councillor Guttridge then, your reply please, if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Evans, Councillor Evans, for the question. The Council seeks to manage water bodies on sites in its ownership in accordance with both our water safety policy, currently under review, and the emergence PSPO for water bodies being developed by colleagues in community safety. There is no current council policy or specific statutory requirement, to the best of my knowledge, for us to manage reeds on our water bodies. However, from an ecology perspective, it is in some circumstances desirable to manage reeds. Reeds managed is most commonly desired in small water bodies in the form of weed removal and via succession management, removal of trees and bushes in the reed beds of both smaller and larger lakes. Small ponds can dry out when reed growth spreads across the entire water body, followed by tree, bushes and other vegetation growth. Large lakes can lose some of the reed bed expanse as the ground dries out via tree, bush, grass growth. Our volunteer groups rotationally maintain the following water bodies in our water sites: Black Bank, Windmill Hill, Thornhill Park, Bedworth Sloughs, Barnacle Lane, the Black Track, Galley Common. It is not always safe, desirable or financially viable to do this on all ponds, water bodies. Larger and silk deep ponds, lakes are often unsafe for voluntary management. All ponds and water bodies are on a contract for litter picking around the edges and water's edge, and grill and blockage removal. This is scheduled to take place 4 times a year. Last year, our volunteers managed the reeds on the following ponds: Windmill Hill, Thornhill Pond, Barnacle Lane Pond. This year, we are due to maintain to a smaller degree as part of wider walk, Thornhill Park, Barnacle Lane Pond. Next year, we are likely to go to the Black Bank and Bedworth sloughs, not to remove reeds here, but to manage willow succession within the reed beds. It is not safe to go into the water of this lake due to silt. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Guttridge. You have a supplemental, Councillor Evans.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr Mayor, and I thank the Cabinet Member for his response. And I think the Council would absolutely agree that this chap has managed to solve Labour's grass-cutting crisis. And I do think that the issue on the horizon now for the Parks Department is the lack of reed removal works due to a lack of historic maintenance. That's no fault of his or this administration's. Now, when I was a child, you could see from one end of the slough to the...
Point of order, Mr Mayor. This should be supplementary questions and not a long childhood history.
It's not a point of order as such. Say, I'm chairing the meeting and I will get the member to ask his question as appropriately. He is aware that we are now on suspended standing orders, but there is a question to be asked there, Councillor Evans, if you would ask the question, please.
Thank you. I'm not going to take any lectures on procedure from the member for Weddington, but when I was a child, you could see from one end of the slough to the other, and you can't now because of the lack of maintenance. So will the Cabinet Member consider conducting a feasibility study on completing reed removal works at the Sidings Pool in Bedworth Heath to prevent flooding, and will he meet with me to see the issue directly?
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Guttridge.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Councillor Evans. It's all right, I can't see because I'm sweating. I would begin by referring Councillor Evans to my reply to the previous question in terms of conducting a feasibility study. In principle, yes, and we could subject to existing work programmes and the availability of resources.
Thank you, Councillor Guttridge. That concludes questions by members. We move on to item 8, special urgency. There are no non-special urgency decisions, so that brings us on to questions 9, item 9, Cabinet Report. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As ever, the Cabinet Report is before members of the Council. It gives a overview of what Cabinet has considered at our previous 2 meetings, and myself and my colleagues will endeavour to answer any questions should they arise. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Condacourt.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This question's for the leader. On back of the June Cabinet meeting, we talked about the regeneration projects, and there's great alarm at the closure of the Abbey Street car park, which wasn't actually discussed in part of these regeneration projects. People had the understanding there'd be a phased approach, and we'll build a bit and build a bit. So can the leader explain what's happening with car parking, because it will have a catastrophic impact on the restaurants and the entertainment venues in that area around the south of the town, around Abbey Street, the Crew, those places, and obviously Om's restaurant on top of Abbey Street. The loss of Abbey Street car park is an absolute disaster, and we were expecting it to close in parts rather than just lose the whole car park in August. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, I am quite surprised at the question, considering I thought Councillor Condacourt was an avid opponent of the car. And also, the alarmist nature of the question would seem to imply that we're approaching the end of the world. And it's this kind of talk which does down our towns, and in particular the regeneration agenda, which we need to push forward. If he doesn't want to get on board with the agenda, he's quite welcome not to be here at all. Because at the end of the day, anyone who denies that regenerating Nuneaton and Bedworth is the primary focus of this council, and indeed this administration, is living with the fairies, Mr Mayor. But when we come to the car park, we know that the car park will have to be closed because it is the site of it is the regeneration site. Now, There is an old saying which goes that you can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs, and that does mean we will have to close the car park in its entirety at some point. Plans are being put in place. We have put forward notifications out to the members of the public. Indeed, I signed off a press release last night, I think, about it. Or it might have been the night before. They tend to merge into one nowadays, Mr. Mayor. But there are plenty of other car parks in Nuneaton and Bedworth for people to use. And I am sure, given the superb cuisine at Om's Restaurant, that whether or not Abbey Street car park is there, they will make the effort to go to Om's Restaurant and indeed any other restaurant along that particular road. Because at the end of the day, Mr. Mayor, if we don't crack on with regeneration, we'll never get there. And our residents deserve better than the doom and misery and gloom of the Green Party opposite.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Condacor, you have a further question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a short one on the devolution deal being mentioned in the West Midlands Combined Authority update. Are we going to be part of the West Midlands devolution deal, or are we going to have a Warwickshire devolution deal separate from the West Midlands Combined Authority? And if we're having a local Warwickshire one, when will it be discussed in Nuneaton? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Condacor. Councillor Wilson, did you wish to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know that Councillor Condacor likes to spend his time reading agendas, so I would invite him to read the West Midlands Combined Authority agenda for this Friday, where it gives an update on the Trailblazer devolution deal. He should know, if he has also read the Levelling Up White Paper supplementary notes, which I know that he would also like to spend his bedtime reading, as I have done, that actually we are not destined to be entering into the West Midlands Combined Authority because we are not a unitary authority, therefore we don't have the power to do so. It would therefore leave us to consider a county devolution deal, which ultimately it is the county's responsibility to do. However, I have had some preliminary, and I would emphasise the word preliminary discussions with the district and borough leaders and the leader of Warwickshire County Council, which both myself and the Chief Executive have attended, and it is something we are considering, but I can state absolutely categorically, Mr. Mayor, that any deal which will be put forward for us to consider and for our consent will require this authority to be a full and equal partner in any structure that comes forwards. And we will not, on this side of the chamber, support anything which does not give us equal and full rights at any table.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Watkins.
I think you forgot my name there, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just about asking respectfully, really, that these reports come in a little bit sooner than they did this time. They came in only yesterday. And in the view of transparency and honesty, I was wondering if we could have them a little bit earlier, perhaps a week earlier in future. Thank you.
I'm not sure in relation to timescales, Councillor Wilson, or is it Councillor Croft? Wilson.
I'll take it, seeing as it seems to be me up to bat at the moment. Yes, I think it's a fair point, but I think he ought to recognise as well that there is a significant amount of officer time that goes into preparing these reports, and also I have to sign them off as well. And given the fact that he has officers running ragged on quite trivial things at the moment, actually, I think he should consider the amount of pressure which has been put on our officer corps at the moment. You don't have a right of public point of order. You should know better as a former mayor. You should know better as a former mayor, Councillor Watkins.
Councillor Wilson is respond. I'll take your point of explanation once Councillor Wilson has finished his speech.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We will try and get these out as quickly as possible, but it is on the agenda specifying that there will be a Cabinet report. He is entitled to look at all the Cabinet papers beforehand. Indeed, he has an invite as a standing item to attend all Cabinet meetings as Leader of the Opposition, something which wasn't granted to me, I must add, Mr. Mayor. So he should know what it was on the Cabinet papers in any event to be able to raise these issues. But where we can, officers will get them out as quickly as they possibly can. But if he wants to talk about honesty and transparency, I think he should consider the record of his own previous administration, of which he was a Cabinet member of.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Watkins.
So, as a point of personal explanation, Mr. Mayor, I have got officers doing things at the minute, and I'm quite entitled to do that. And I am to putting things through the members' inquiry because I have been instructed to do that by Cabinet members. So I will continue to do that, and I'm doing it on things that are asked of me. So to come out with such things as that, it's just disrespectful. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I take the point that he is entitled to raise issues as a councillor. No one's denying that. But we all have a duty to be mindful of the pressure that we put on officers. And he has asked something else tonight of Cabinet members, which puts an additional pressure onto officers. We all have a duty to be mindful of the workload of our officer corps.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. And Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Our question is in regard to the Borough Plan Review. Bearing in mind the temporary closure of the housing list and the shortfall in rented housing, will the Council be updating the requirement for housing from developments? Currently, it stands at 25%, while neighbouring authorities have at least 40%. A figure of 40% would allow us to ensure that we have houses of good quality for residents to move into. You may have noticed I have not mentioned affordable housing, as what is affordable to one resident is not affordable to another, especially in this borough in regard to Nuneaton and Bedworth's wages. There is a desperate need for rented accommodation. Can I ask the consideration is given to rented accommodation rather than affordable? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Golby, or is it planning? Sorry, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, it probably crosses both our portfolios in terms of housing. I'm not sure the facts are right in terms of affordable housing. We certainly are fixed at 25%. I've yet to see other authorities at 40%, but I'll take that on advisement. We have introduced a policy very recently about first homes. So 25% of our 25% affordable will be now part of the first homes delivery where required, which discounts properties at 30% for first-time buyers. In terms of the allocation for housing for rental, that isn't in my portfolio. That actually sits with housing. All we do is apply the rules that say 25% of the development should be affordable. So I can't answer in terms of the split of whether that's affordable to buy or affordable to rent, as that doesn't fall in my portfolio.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Shepherd, you have a further question?
It's a supplementary in terms of what Councillor Smith has said. While I appreciate what you've said, I have done the research, and the other neighbouring authorities are at 40% now, which I think leaves us at a disadvantage in terms of getting more houses onto the roll. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
I think that was more of a statement than a question, but Councillor Smith, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, there wasn't really another question there. It's the same thing. It is something I've discussed with the planning department. We haven't come to a decision yet, but it's something we're mindful of, and if we can find a way to deliver more affordable housing, we will do.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I'm looking round, seeing if there's any further questions on the Cabinet report. Anyone indicating? We're happy to note that report then, members. Thank you. Moving on. Item 10, changes to the membership of the NABSEL Shareholder Committee. Councillor Watkins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, this change comes about because I was put on the membership committee. So this is quite simple. It's to remove me from the membership committee because I'm on the board of directors, and replace myself with Councillor Jill Shepherd. So that needs a second.
Yes, I'm just asking for a seconder. Councillor Shepherd, you wish to second that? Yeah, we do. It's just a simple, straight vote on that one. So those in favour of that amendment, that change? Those against? Abstentions? That's carried. Moving on, item 11, recommendations from Cabinet and other committees. Sorry, is this you, Councillor Wilson or Councillor Smith? Just hold please for a moment, Councillor Smith. Missing item 11. I beg your pardon. Sorry, it's 11A. Sorry, Councillor Smith, it's now back to you.
As we were, thank you, Mr.
Yes.
Mayor. Got there eventually. This is the members' calling procedure. You might remember, following a flagrant abuse of the members' planning calling procedure by Councillor Condacor, the facility was temporarily suspended to allow time for this procedure to be reviewed to prevent further abuse. This was a reckless and selfish act by Councillor Condacor, and if we'd not intervened, it would have created massive problems for an already stretched planning department, and could potentially have brought the system to a grinding halt, which in turn would cause untold damage to both the council, its reputation, and to the many residents and businesses that rely on this council to carry out its duties in a professional manner in their service. All of this was because Councillor Condacor would not accept that the council's proportionality rules meant he didn't qualify for a seat on the Planning Applications Committee. As a result of this action, the procedure has been revised to prevent such an abuse happening in the future, and the full revised procedure is listed at Appendix A in your report. In short, there are 3 simple safeguards in place to prevent future abuse. Firstly, a ward councillor can request that a minor application in their ward be called in for determination by the planning committee. Secondly, 3 councillors would be needed to request a major application call-in to the committee. And finally, in both cases, sufficient and rational reasons need to be given for the call-in, to be determined by the head of planning in consultation with the chair of the planning committee. I've received a couple of suggestions for amendments from members, which I'm not minded to support at this time. I think the policy we've laid out is adequate and fitting for the purpose for the moment. I will, however, set an early review date to check the efficiency of this policy, and if necessary, will recommend at that point any amendments to be made. So the recommendation is to adopt the new calling procedure. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Is there a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Kukovic.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to second that, and I'd like to reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. That's noted. Any speakers? Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And we need to consider why it is that we are having to consider this report tonight. And the answer is very simple. It's because of the conduct of the member for Weddington. The member in question decided to launch an offensive attack on the planning department in retaliation for the fact that at the most recent local elections, the people of the borough decided to reduce the size of the Green Group from 3 to 2. That does not mean he gets a seat on the planning committee. That is maths, and it is democracy. The call-in system has worked well for many decades, for both members and officers alike, and I think that the planning department would share that view. But due to the conduct of just one member, this has had to change. And it's because the member for Weddington wanted to bring the business and operation of the planning department to a standstill by calling in every application to the committee on that week. And we're talking about very obscure planning applications, window replacements, conservatory applications. And he didn't give any explanation or rationale whatsoever for wanting to bring those applications forward. I want to place on record my concerns around some of the wording within this procedure, particularly around the unprecedented powers given to the chairman of the Planning Applications Committee and the head of planning, because the procedure would basically allow them to control the business that comes forward to the committee. And that's nothing against Councillor Čekovic, but with respect, we have had former planning committee chairs from the socialist group who have made questionable decisions over recent years. That said, I completely understand why Cabinet is having to bring this procedure forward. I don't think Cabinet has got any other choice but to bring this forward, because if we don't, then it will impact the day-to-day operation of the planning department. And that is why I will absolutely support the recommendation this evening. But I don't think it's right that this is being having to brought forward due to the inappropriate behaviour of just one feral member of the authority. Do I believe the procedure needs to be reviewed? Yes, I do, and I welcome the fact that the Cabinet member has given that assurance to the Council this evening. But I want to place on record so that when members of the public come to councillors asking to call in planning applications, that will be more difficult in the future. That is not the fault of this side of the chamber, but due to the inappropriate behaviour of Councillor Kundaka, who tried to bring the operation of the planning department to a standstill.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Kundaka.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Planning used to be a thing that all parties got involved in. Before I was a councillor, when I was in the gallery, we had a Lib Dem councillor here, and he sat in this chamber and sat on the planning committee, even though there's only one Lib Dem. We've always, until recently, had a cross-section on planning. When we had a BNP councillors, the BNP councillor sat on planning. But the way the allocations are being done now, the choice has been made to disenfranchise the Green Group. And it is a choice, because the group we're in has been put on the appeals committee that A, rarely meets, and B, the council has failed to give us any training, which means even though we're on that committee, we cannot take part. Coming to the calling procedure, it was a procedure that was always very ragged, and things would come to this committee, to come to the planning committee, with someone calling it in as a councillor and then no one explaining what the problem was. So this form is really, really useful. It is a procedure that did need tightening up, so we had a sensible way of deciding which applications went to calling. So I'm pleased the system's being reviewed, but one thing I would ask to change, and I'm going to move as an amendment, is we change it to that 2 councillors need to call in a major application rather than 3. So the amendment is on page 38, that it's item 2 says 2 councillors, and you've still got the checks and balances with your rule 3, which means if the 2 Green councillors call it in, the chair of planning and the head of planning can still say, no, that's not a valid calling. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kundaka. Is that receive a second of that amendment?
I'd like to second that and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. There is an amendment. We will now continue with the debate. Put your microphone off, please, Councillor Wright. Thank you. That that amendment has received a second. We will now continue with the debate. With an amendment, you can now speak again, Councillor Evans. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And if I can make some points from Councillor Kundaka's statement to his amendment. He talks about councillors not giving explanations and rational reasons to bring it forward to the system. What did he do 2 months ago? He called in 12 applications without giving any reason whatsoever. So the absolute cheek and hypocrisy from the member for Weddington. And when he sums up to his amendment, I'd be grateful if he can outline 12 reasons why he called those 12 applications into the committee, particularly the one for a window replacement.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. I've got Councillor Golby next. It's the whole thing.
No, it's just on the amendment.
On the amendment at the moment, sorry. Right, okay, go back. We'll come back to you in a moment. Councillor Kovic.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Wow, Councillor Condacor, you reap what you sow, I think springs to mind. This is down to you, let's be honest. We had a system that worked, it wasn't abused by councillors. You even sent me a cheeky little message, didn't you, about it. Wouldn't it be easier to allow one Green councillor on this than all this? You know, shenanigans. It's not the first time we've used that term in this chamber in regard to some of your behaviour, and I hope it's the last time we have to. Okay, this is on your back. 3 allows us proper checks and balances. Okay, now I appreciate you're a party of 2. You're now going to have to go outside your party. You're going to have to speak to other councillors. I myself am very approachable, and if you have something which is genuine, I'm always happy to listen. But I know that will create extra work and a burden for you. So you've kind of brought this on your own shoulders, councillor. But I think if we're going to do it, let's do it properly. Okay, let's review it in a suitable amount of time, as Councillor Smith outlined. But let's make sure, you know, you want it done properly, then let's do it properly. Let's not have shortcuts. Let's not go for 2. Let's go for 3, because that then means we need to have a mini quorum formed, okay, which 2 really isn't. Okay, so let's do it sort of properly if we're going to go down that road, okay? But let's also perhaps think about our own actions, because they have consequences, okay? And we're seeing that, and it's a shame because the system worked perfectly well for so long. And I say, it is a flagrant abuse, and I'm sorry to have to sort of stand up and sort of be berating in my tone, because it's not really something I'd like to do to you or any other councillor, but I feel it needs to be said. And I feel it should also be pointed out the amount of stress this caused officers as well. I was subject to the emails on this. Okay, officers were very worried because potentially you could be bringing something like 30 or 40 items to each and every planning applications committee meeting. Now, if you consider we normally get between about 5 and 6, that normally takes us somewhere between 2 and 3 hours. So essentially we could be looking at 10, 12-hour-long meetings to get through all of that. So where would the money come from to pay the officers? You know, where would the money come from to pay the officers? What about their work-life balance? What about the residents who then have to wait for something very simple, like Councillor Evans alluded to, like a window replacement? You know, how does that slow them down? Do they then feel like they have to come in and speak and represent themselves for something that really should just go through planning officer approval? So you haven't really thought through your actions, and that brings us to where we are today. So I will not be supporting your amendment, Councillor Condacor, sadly.
Thank you, Councillor Kovic. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I can't support, and this current group will not support any attempt to change from 3 to 2, because the system used to work on a basis of trust and responsibility and respect. And Councillor Condacor has shot all 3 of those principles to shreds, really. We used to take it on trust that if a councillor called in a application, it was because there was a genuine reason. It could be that they had, and usually, and I can only speak from my own experience, but it used to be because a resident would call me, they would have some concerns about it, and in fairness, so that they could have their say, and they felt that they were being listened to, without expressing a view on it myself, because I am and was on the planning committee, I'd say, right, I'll call it in so you can have an opportunity to put your side of the argument to the committee, the applicant can put their side, and then everyone feels at least they've been listened to. Councillor Condacor completely betrayed that trust. Now, if you think it's been, what, 12 weeks since the original, or thereabouts, since the original call-ins of all 15, I think it was 15 applications or thereabouts on that particular list. If you say an average of about 10 a week, we could be looking at close to 150 applications currently pending to go to the Planning Applications Committee. That is absolutely, to quote Councillor Condacor's favourite word, crazy. Imagine the stress that that will cause, as has already been mentioned, to the officers, but also the stress to residents. At the time that we're having crisis of living, cost of living concerns, they have saved up, they have scrimped and saved for a minor amendment to their house, a minor extension or a minor conservatory, or as in Councillor Evans's case, and I read that list, there was actually a window change request on there. They've saved for that, and all because Councillor Condacor was trying to score a petty political point when the numbers didn't stack up and the law didn't stack up in his favour. He threw his dummies out of the pram and he tried to cause mayhem for everyone. What about the businesses who relied on that work to actually see themselves through? The self-employed tradesmen who would actually be doing that work, who would have had things booked in for weeks, if not months in advance, and then because Councillor Condacor decided to play God with the system, he could cause their entire business to crash because he didn't get his way. We talked about kids' behaviour earlier. It was nothing short of childish behaviour we saw exhibited by a member who should quite clearly know better, and signed a code of conduct to say that he would behave according to the Nolan principles. I don't believe he upheld any of the Nolan principles of public life in his actions, and I think he should look at himself in the mirror. And I know he's smirking at me and all the other members on this side of the chamber, but perhaps he should look at himself in the mirror, or perhaps go and ring every single member of the public who he wanted to call in and explain to them and see them out why he decided to play God with their lives. Because it's not fair, Mr. Mayor, not at all. Now, 3 members means that he has to reach across the aisle and actually reach a consensus. He keeps saying that he can reach across the aisle and work with people. Well, now prove it. If you think you have a genuine reason, as Councillor Kovetkovic mentioned, we will listen to it. But he tries to play God in everyone's ward, Mr. Mayor. At the planning committee where he spoke against this and said, oh, perhaps we should allow 100 metres here or there against all of the wards, because some wards do impact on each other. So myself and Councillor Guttridge sometimes have issues with Councillor Tromans and yourself, Mr. Mayor, because we have areas which adjoin. But then on the same agenda, he called in an item in Wembrook. Last time I checked the map, Wembrook is nowhere near Weddington. Yes, he's done one in Exhall. I'm sure other members could also mention areas which have been called in. He has broken the system, Mr. Mayor, and now his actions have consequences. So perhaps finally he will start to learn that his misdemeanours and his activities actually have real-life consequences. Own it, Councillor Condacor, because this is all on you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Tromans, you wanted to speak to the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any fool can break something. They can damage it, they can cause harm, recklessly, maliciously, destroy things. But that's not our role here. Our role as councillors are to make things better for residents. I'd never have seen this from any other party that got mentioned tonight. This was malicious. This was somebody who failed by the democratic process and who sought to overturn that by ruining people's lives, by impacting on them. We've heard what Councillor Wilson said. Think of the tradespeople that have to schedule this in, order the materials and all the rest of it. And then it gets knocked back for weeks and weeks. Totally messes things up. Think about the householders and the residents. No thought given for them, and not for the first time. That councillor has got form for using his big ego and getting the poor residents to back that up and write the cheque for it. I remember the planning appeal where some of them in his own ward could have faced financial ruin if that had been lost. Councillor Condacor didn't care. Councillor Condacor was on an ego trip. Good councillors make things better. Bad councillors who really aren't representing people, only their ego, do nonsense like we had a few weeks ago. Try and wreck planning for ordinary people, ordinary, hard-working, decent contractors. It's an utter disgrace. Dreadful behaviour, and not for the first time from that councillor. I'm absolutely not going to support this amendment. I think we should move to the vote. We should proceed with this. It is a crying shame that after all the years and party disagreements in this place, that one person just behaved so unreasonably, it's ruined it. And we've had to go to these steps and the cost of doing that. But we're here tonight, so we should get on and do it and fix it and stop this abuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robert Tromans. Councillor Smith.
Actually, I was going to speak to the amendment, but I think we should go straight to the vote, and I'll come back on the substantive
You're
issue.
seconding Councillor Tromans' proposal?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, we go back to the seconder of the amendment, which is Councillor Wright. You wish to speak? Okay. So we just now go straight to the vote on that amendment then, please. So those in favour of the amendment, those against? And abstentions? 3.
Amendment's lost.
The amendment is lost. So back to the main item. And the proposal, Councillor Golby, you'd indicated you wanted to speak on the main item. Now your opportunity.
This it can't be, I mean, I know we've had a lot of conversation, but the reason why we've changed this, or we've had to change this process, cannot be understated. It was effectively a declaration of war, not only on the planning department, but on our residents. Why should people be used as collateral damage because you are having a little man-child paddy about not getting on the planning committee, when the political proportionality is always dealt with by rules and regulations that follow through? It's allocations by rules, not by, we didn't pick things out of a hat, we didn't pick anybody to do this, and yet you chose to use the planning system to basically abuse your position. And I will say that you abused your position, because you did. You caused an awful lot of trouble, and the threat was there to keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. So I know residents at home might be watching this going, oh, what they all waffling for, but the impact on our planning system and to the residents directly for the smallest thing would have been absolutely huge. And it cannot be understated. And I have to say, I've never met anybody who is as entitled as you seem to be for no reason whatsoever. Sending emails or messages about wouldn't it be easier to have a green on the planning system, that's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. That's tantamount to saying, I'll keep doing this unless you put me on. Certainly that was the way it was read. And I'm sure that was the way it was meant. But it's ridiculous. And there's a salutary lesson here for the Labour group as well, because if you start backing him on things like this, your cards are marked on this as well. So I'd suggest that you kind of think about it if he approaches you, especially if he's called in things on other wards, you know. He's got to be learning lessons somehow, and we're going to have to start doing this. But this has caused a whole raft of issues. And again, it cannot be understated. It can't be understated. It would have affected pretty much everybody that wanted to build anything in our borough or change anything, and not just big housing developments like it will be portrayed that he's rescuing the universe and all the rest of it, because that's nonsense and all. So I'm happy to support this amendment, and I hope that everybody else does too. Not the amendment, that's gone, the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Golby. We've got Councillor Smith, you wanted to speak on the main item? No, not yet. Oh, sorry. Okay, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to put something on record, because actually something that Councillor Condacor intimated is actually quite a serious accusation, that he seemed to imply that the numbers on the committee were gerrymandered to deliberately keep him off the committee. That is far from the truth. And I know he has a habit of FOIing and EOIing or whatever it is emails, so I lay a challenge to him. If you want to, FOI my emails like he's done before on when I had the actual numbers come back from Phil Richardson as the director. He might have already done it, I don't know. The response I get, the numbers were automatically worked out according to proportionality, and if you have one more councillor here, it affects everything. It's a whole equation that gets changed. And the numbers are presented which showed that you did not, or rather your group, or the Green Group did not, have any entitlement to a seat on that committee. My first response was, if that is what the numbers come out at, I am not touching them. Because that way I could not be accused of deliberately gerrymandering any committee assignments. And if it had worked out you'd have had an entitlement to that seat, I would have equally turned around and said, yes. In fact, I think you even have a seat on the Borough Plan Committee, which is something you've banged on for years about wanting to have a seat on that. The numbers fell in your favour on that one. I didn't block that one because that was your entitlement according to law. And I act lawfully in this authority, and I will defy him to prove otherwise, because I gave an immediate response to the officers. If that's what the numbers come out with, if that's what the legislation says, then that's what I will propose at full council, and that's what I did. So if you think there's a giant conspiracy, as is your want, I know you have many conspiracy theories, prove it, because that was a very, very serious accusation to make, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Yeah, I've seen no more indications. Go back to the seconder of the original motion. Councillor Kovacevic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to come back to a point that Councillor Evans made about the Chair of Planning Applications Committee's power. Rest assured that power will not be abused. It will be used sensibly, and I'm sure any of my successors will also do so in a similar light, in the spirit that it's intended. Equally, I would say to any council, if you are struggling to find a third, then please always come to me as the Chair of Planning Application Committee, and I will do what I can. If it is reasonable, I will quite happily back that. It is, at the end of the day, a cross-party committee, so I'm more than happy to do that for anybody. Councillor Condacor, you are always welcome on the Planning Committee as an observer. You are always welcome to comment on it. The fact you may not have voting rights doesn't stop you from turning up, and I hope you've always found you've been treated with courtesy and respect by myself and other members, either as a sitting councillor and member of that committee, or in more recent times when you've turned up as a councillor who just wants to ask them questions. Okay, and I've extended every courtesy to you to actually allow you to ask all the questions that you want and to make all the points that you want so that it can be considered by the wider Planning Applications Committee. And that won't change for you or anybody else, because I believe firmly in the openness of committees, okay, and that they serve that purpose. So, you know, that's not going to change. You know, you are equally welcome, but I think your attitude does need to change. I would say what we've got here is a really good system in place. Certainly, I think we need to give it a go. I think it sort of ticks all the boxes. It stops all those abuses that we've seen. And it will allow sort of councils to deal with things locally quite easily, but sort of slightly larger things which are more controversial. Okay, obviously we'll need that sort of mini quorum of 3 councillors agreeing, which is no bad thing because it shows that there is a will, and it's not just sort of down to the individual will of one councillor. So for that, I will be supporting the original proposal tonight, and I'd encourage you all to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kovacevic. Councillor Smith.
Yes, thank you. Totally agree. I won't do any more Councillor Condacor bashing because, you know, everyone said it tonight. I think we're all quite clear on what he's done. He's taken a system that was perfectly good. It was respected and used respectfully, and he's broken it. He's abused it, and we now have to put something really robust in place, which is what we're attempting to do. I will set an early review date because there have been some concerns raised, certainly by Councillor Evans, as to how this will work, but I'm pretty confident that we've got something in place now that is robust and will work for everybody. Just to give an example, we've heard a lot tonight about the 15 applications that were put in and the possible repercussions of those. One of those was actually in my ward. It was a simple application to replace a fence that was broken next to a farm track, and they wanted to put an 8-foot fence in instead of the normal 6-foot fence because they had tractors and big lorries going several metres from their house, and they wanted to block that out. Quite simple. I got a very angry and irate call from that resident. He'd phoned planning to speak to the officer, was expecting a quick result, and was met with a comment from the officer that said, unfortunately, although your application is very simple, it won't be dealt with the speed that we accepted in the first place, because it's going to have to go to planning committee. And he said, well, how long is that going to take? She said, well, I can't tell you. It might be the next one, might be the one after. Could be weeks and weeks. He said, well, what am I to do in the meantime? I've sort of pretty much got a contractor sorted to do it. You told me it would be a quick decision because it was simple. So what am I to do now? She said, well, I'm sorry, I can't do anything about it because a councillor has called it in. He said, well, which councillor's called this in? You know, I know both my local councillors, and certainly they wouldn't have a problem with it. And she said, well, I have to tell you, it's Councillor Condacourt. So he phoned Councillor Condacourt and said, why have you called my application in? And Councillor Condacourt couldn't give him an answer. He didn't know where his property was. He didn't know what the application was. He didn't know what the repercussions for that person were, let alone the repercussions on the planning department. And that was a very real example of the fear we had if week after week he called in all those planning applications. So it was a very real threat, and I'm really pleased that we've got something robust in place. So the recommendation is to adopt that new calling procedure, and let's get going with it.
On a comment already made. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Smith, in response where you did mention me, although it's not about your the comment about me, could I ask, as per our constitution...
No questions. It's point of person explanation.
Okay, if I could just... Yes. So the point I was going to make, Mr. Mayor, is that, as I understand it, the constitution does allow members who do submit applications to the committee to rescind them. And if Councillor Condacourt was to rescind some of those applications tomorrow, perhaps the planning department might be able to make a speedy decision on some of those applications.
Councillor Smith, I will let you come back. You might
I know it's a personal explanation, but if I can come back, those planning applications, we actually rescinded its calling. So they, it undid the damage, but not before people felt damaged.
that explains.
That was a chief executive power. But also, just to underline, this is not the only thing that triggers a planning application going to committee. We still have the 5 application objection rule. So very often this calling process isn't actually required.
Thank you, Councillor Smith, for that further explanation. We now move to the vote on the original motion. All those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? So against first. 4. Any abstentions? Okay, that's carried. Moving on to item 11B, Arbory Design Code. Councillor Smith, I believe you're going to move this recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hopefully this one will be a bit shorter. Just to remind Council with the context to this, we were one of just 14 local planning authorities that were granted pilot status to test out the government's National Model Design Code. and we were awarded £50,000 to cover the cost of that work. The code aims to provide a framework for creating healthy, greener, environmental responsive, sustainable and distinctive places with a consistent and high quality standard of design that will create beautiful places and homes. After a successful pilot, the design code is now being rolled out to other local planning authorities right across the country. Once adopted, this Arbory design code will become a material consideration as part of any future planning application on the HSG2 allocation. And the many learnings from the process can be applied to future large-scale sites across the borough. This report is to recommend to the Council that the Arbory Design Code supplementary planning document be adopted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Golby.
I'll second and reserve my right to speak, Chair.
Thank you. Now opens the item up to debate. Councillor Condacore.
Thank you very much. It is really good that we've got a design guide for Arbory. Every major development site in the borough should be done with this high quality, and we should actually have consultation so we don't end up with the rubbish planning we have like up the long shoot, where every little bit of development doesn't join up with every other little bit. To get from one house on the long shoot to the school or some open space, you have to go out onto the long shoot, along to whichever development has got the open space or school on, and back in again. It's crazy that we did it this way, and a design guide is absolutely essential when we're doing large areas. And it would actually buy in some public support for actually some of this development, because the public could say, well, we need a shop, or we need this, or we need that. We have a system which we've been given permission to rubbish development. Piecemeal, not joined up, not having the mix of amenities. If you look on the Wenton Road, we have houses, 3 different development, not a single shop, GP not happened yet, all sorts of issues. This design guide is what we need, and we need to insist that developers pay, or landowners or speculators, for these design guides to be done for all the areas where we've got major applications. Because doing it without a design guide is just nuts. So I'm fully in favour of this design guide and hope actually we do a better job of planning and not just produce disjointed mess. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member? Councillor Golby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm really happy to, again, be speaking on this. It's a real positive for the area that seems to be getting heaped with negatives. We seem to be getting dumped on quite a lot in Arbory, as well as obviously Weddington with the houses, but we seem to be getting dumped on with poor transport connections, etc., etc. I'm interested in some of the comments that have actually been made, particularly in relation to the Bermuda Phoenix Centre Park. I'm quite pleased at the fact that it's been raised by the dealer group, because looking at the state of the park, I'm actually quite sick of getting a kick-in for what is their responsibility, and it's here, it's their responsibility, and I would challenge them to actually come and sort the park out before making any comment on it. We need, well, all the equipment got taken away, none of it's been replaced. It's been subject to vandalism over the years, and it's been eroded, and now we don't have any. So if anyone from dealers is watching, come and fix it, please. But apart from that, I'm actually welcoming the design guide, because I think it gives us something to aim for. I think everything that we should do within the borough should be with our residents at the forefront. They should be able to have a say in what goes on their doorstep, and not through the planning applications, which can be quite cumbersome and can be quite difficult to navigate. Certainly the borough plan historically wasn't really well represented to residents. The website was terrible. It wasn't easily understood unless you were a planner. And something like this actually gives people a basis to be able to visualise what the area might actually be capable of. And we're all capable of knowing what's nice for our area and knowing what's not, and knowing what will work and knowing what isn't, because that's what we're here for. That's why we represent the areas that we do. So I am pleased. And yes, we were quite fortunate, and I'd say lucky actually, getting this in Arbury, because it was hotly contested and it was a nationwide pilot. And I'm happy to say that I put in significant input into this. So yeah, I have pleased to ask everybody else to support it. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Golby. Councillor Smith.
Yes, thank you. This was truly a fantastic piece of work, and I'd like to publicly thank Councillor Golby, because she played a very big part in how this looks, how it's shaped. She knows her area well. She knows what the needs are. She had a very clear picture in her mind of what a good development would look like, and it gave the planners something to go away with and shape what is a fantastic piece of work. And if we can emulate this even to half of this sort of quality on future developments, I would be over the moon. It is something we're taking forward. We have limitations both financially and in terms of officer time, in terms of master planning, if you like, on large-scale sites. What I have to agree in this case with Councillor Condacourt. Had this been in place when all that development up at Weddington and St Nick's took place, it would have looked very different than it looked now, with all the piecemeal developments. And that is a trap we shouldn't fall into again as an authority. So it's great. I'd like to see more of this. There were a lot of lessons learnt that we can apply individually when we're in conversation with developers. And we're looking at adjusting some rules to give councillors a better sort of input at the early stages of those discussions, but something I'll come back to this council with at a later date. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. We now move to the vote. All those in favour? That seems to be unanimous. just for clarification, any against, any abstentions? It's unanimous. Thank you. Sorry. Great on the way in. That concludes our business for this evening. I thank members for their attendance and input. Do have a safe journey home. And that concludes the business. It's now declare it closed. Thank you.